Hello friends, I'm Tim Wildsmith, and in this video I need your help answering a simple question. Well, it sounds simple, but it's actually somewhat complex. And the question is this: should Thomas Nelson update the New King James Version? So I recently did a really fun live stream video with my friends Tim Nichols and Tim Frisch, where we asked one another, if you were in charge of a certain Bible publisher, what would you do? What would you change? It was a really fun conversation. We went through probably close to 10 different publishers. We were not in agreement on everything. And one of the things that we were not necessarily in agreement on was when it came to Thomas Nelson. We got to that portion. I'm going to play it here for you in a second. And I made a suggestion about updating the New King James Version. And as you'll see, my friend Tim Nichols was not excited about that. So I'm going to play you the clip right now, and then I'm going to come back on the end and kind of give a little bit more context and give you a little bit more defense for why I was thinking about that. And then I'm going to ask you to weigh in the comments and help me decide whether or not this is a good idea or not.
This is Zondervan and Thomas Nelson. Zondervan, Thomas Nelson. I'm putting them together because they're both under HarperCollins, and they do a lot of similar things. And for time's sake, I wanted to streamline it a little bit. So I'm going to say, is anybody oh, please let me go first? Or any of you, because I want to be fair about this? Or are you okay, Wildsmith?
I'm just going to focus on Thomas Nelson. Thomas Nelson publishes KJV, NKJV, NET. I really like the NET as a translation. I love the full notes edition. I would love to see them make more editions of the NET. I'm guessing that the reason they don't is probably because they don't sell as much of that translation. I get that, but I would love to see more NET editions. I'd love to see a premiere collection in the NET. I don't know if they still own the rights to the RSV or if it's in public domain. I know that Thomas Nelson originally published the RSV, so I'd love to see them do a throwback RSV, kind of like Skylar did with the RSV Quintel. If they could do something, maybe, we're coming up on 75 years of the RSV in a few years. That would be cool. And then here's my hot take. If I was in charge of Thomas Nelson, I would commission an official update to the New King James Version.
I'm a hurting.
What? You're hurting?
No, I'm driving to Nashville right now in this live stream. We got a problem, y'all. We got a problem.
Well, I just want to apologize that I've driven a wedge between my friends.
You don't think they should update the NKJV?
No!
Why?
The notes. Only the notes. Okay, I'll give you this. The notes. If they updated the notes and left the text alone.
You're just one of those hardcore, leave the NKJV, don't touch it.
I just like it.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, I guess I could make a comment about this, just as a neutral observer. NKJV user base are oriented, because they're using the NKJV. The NKJV, think of how long it took for them to accept an update of the King James, right? The NKJV users are very resistant to updates.
What about
just a general comment.
What about they take a page from Lockman's book and they keep the 82, which is really the 84. They keep the 84 in print. They keep publishing it, but they do an NKJV 2025 or something like that. I mean, the 40th anniversary is next year.
And you know that caused no controversy for Lockman to do that. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Now, I hear what you're saying, Wildsmith, but I think from what I've heard of the user base, anytime you mention an update to people who love the NKJV, they really don't like it. So, I mean, we can listen and hear what the audience thinks, but hey, I mean, they'll definitely get a lot of attention if they talk about it. But
Tim Nichols and Chad Wilhelm and other people, what do you mean when you say you want the notes updated? Just so that you have better notes about the latest textual research in the text and stuff like that?
Yes. If they updated the notes, I'd be okay with that because there's been discoveries since 1982.
Sure.
But just leave the text alone.
One of the things I love about the NKJV is that even though you're getting the TR, they're giving you the majority text, they're giving you the critical text notes so one of the cool things about the NKJV as it sits is you're reading it and you get the best of all three kind of textual streams, if you use the notes on a regular basis, if you refer to the notes, you get the biggest picture, I think, which I do like that about it.
Well, and I also disagree with the oldest and most reliable manuscripts is always the best approach.
Sure.
As well.
Yeah.
Well, that was a really good back and forth, and there's more we could say about that. Could be a whole video we do. We could talk about the NKJV. Let me.
Oh yeah, it got kind of feisty there for a minute, didn't it? And that was not the only time. We were together for about an hour and a half. So I'm going to put a link in this video's description. You can watch the entirety of that video over on Tim Frisch's channel. So backing up there. Okay, so Thomas Nelson, primary publisher of the New King James Version. Here are two of my favorite copies, the large print thin line, the single column reference Bible. I love the NKJV. I love what they're doing. What happened after this video, we talked about all these different publishers, and I did get a handful of messages from the actual people who are in charge of those publishers. One of those was just a kind of funny message that I got from a guy named Philip Nation, who is the Bible publisher for Thomas Nelson, who's in charge of the NKJV at Thomas Nelson. He was like, what did you suggest that I do? So I took that and I kind of made a little joke on the New King James Bible Fans Facebook page. And I said, uh-oh, when you get a message from the publisher. And literally about 90 to 100 people hopped in the comments. And by far, the response was what Tim Nichols was saying. Don't change the NKJV. So I want to give you a couple of more pieces of information about why I feel like this. So many of you know that I am writing a book about Bible translations, and I've already written the chapter about the NKJV, and I've done all of my research. And so what happened is the NKJV was developed, it was first released in its full edition in 1982, and as I mentioned in the video, they did a light revision in 1984, just a few small corrections and changes that they wanted to make. And ever since 1984, the NKJV has not changed. For example, like Crossway released the ESV for the first time in 2001, and then they've updated it in 2007, 2011, and 2016. After 2016, they said, we're not going to change it anymore, and then they quickly reversed course. They haven't done an update since, but Bible translations regularly get updated. One of the reasons is something that Tim Nichols and I mentioned in that video, is that new research is done, new manuscripts are found, biblical textual research continues to be updated, and there are certain things that sometimes make Bible translators want to go, okay, maybe we should adjust some wording here, maybe we should adjust the order of words or some of the punctuation or things like that. It's often very, very small changes, but it does need to be done. One of the things that Tim's talking about when he says they should change the notes, and that's what I saw from a lot of people on that Facebook page, was don't change the text of the NKJV, but it's okay to update the textual footnotes. And as you heard me say, there's a really great note system in the NKJV. The NKJV, I said TR in that video. That means Textus Receptus. If you don't know what that is, the Textus Receptus is the Greek edition of the Bible that was used in the translation of the King James Version. Most modern translations use a different text of the Greek Bible, a combination of several ancient manuscripts called the critical text. There's also a third stream called the majority text. The majority text is basically the what's found in the majority of the thousands and thousands of Greek manuscripts of the New Testament. The critical text is usually some of the oldest ones, and then the Textus Receptus is the one that was the best ones that were available to them at the time that the King James Bible was being produced. So in the notes of the NKJV, anytime that the critical text or the majority text differs from the Textus Receptus, they have a note in the footnotes. So when you open the NKJV, you are reading the New Testament based on the Textus Receptus, but in the notes of the Bible, you get all of the alternate renderings that are coming from the other textual streams. So it's a really great way to kind of compare and contrast. Honestly, those differences are very small in the grand scheme of things. So that's one reason why I would argue, like what I was thinking when I said that was, there's been a lot that's happened in the last 41 years since the NKJV was published in the world of textual criticism. And even though it hasn't changed a lot for the Textus Receptus, because that's not something that's changed, it still kind of gives us some new insight. So I would go ahead and say I agree with Tim and the others who say change the notes, because as far as the TR goes, the text in the Bible isn't going to actually change that much, but it would change the way you do the notes. So that's one reason why I can agree with them. The second thing that worries me about the NKJV not changing is that eventually it is going to start to sound dated, right? Language changes over time. In the past 40 years, the way we speak, the way we talk has changed a little bit. And that is a second big reason why we see Bible translations choosing to do new editions of the Bible, new revisions and new translations is because A, new textual research, B, language changes. And so I think the further we get away from the 1970s when the majority of this work was done and the early 80s when the NKJV was released, the further we get away from that, the more and more dated the NKJV will tend to sound. Just like today, so many people that I know and talk to say, I can't understand the King James Version. Well, that was 400 years ago. The NKJV is only 10% of that age, right? But it's going to get bigger and bigger. So I would suggest that maybe it's an idea that we update the NKJV to reflect some changes in the language. I'm not saying we necessarily have to change it away from the TR. I'm also not saying that we necessarily have to change it to be using more gender-inclusive language like a lot of other translations have done in recent history. I'm okay with the NKJV continuing to kind of be more on a conservative angle on that, but I do think the further we get away from all of that, the more difficult it's going to be for people to engage with the NKJV in a meaningful way. And I am one of those people. Clearly, Tim Frisch and Tim Nichols love the NKJV and respect it. I am too. I really like it as a translation, but I would be interested to see what happens. Here's what I wrote. I wrote some of that in the chapter in my book about the NKJV. And then the last thing I said was, whatever they decide to do, Thomas Nelson is going to get criticized for it. There will be people who criticize them for not updating it and letting it maybe get stale and old if that's what happens. And if they do choose to update it, there will be people who will criticize them for doing that. So it's kind of a no-win situation. I apologize, Philip, that it's kind of that situation that you're in, but I for one, would be interested in at least having those conversations, or the people in charge being able to have those conversations and working with scholars to see what that would actually produce if they decided to do a light revision for these times. So I want to hear from you though. Do you think I'm crazy? Clearly, all of those people in the NKJV fan group think I'm crazy. So if you're watching this video and you're one of those, feel free to disagree with me. I am not the final authority on this. I'm just sharing a few of the reasons why I suggested that in the first place that I didn't really get to kind of process through in that live stream video. But if you agree with me, you can also leave me a comment and back me up. This is that video was very lighthearted, but it's cool to be able to have some of these conversations and to think about it. So this is a little snapshot of what you're going to get in my book about Bible translations. I'm going to talk about the history of the translation. I'm going to talk about the process that went into translate it. I'm going to talk about the textual basis, what I just talked about with the textus receptus versus the critical text. I'm going to talk about the textual basis behind each translation. I'm also going to talk about the translation philosophy so you can see where each translation falls on the Bible translation spectrum. Is it more literal or word for word, sometimes called formal equivalence? Or is it more thought for thought, dynamic, functional equivalence? And how does that affect the way it reads and the way that it interacts with other translations? I'm really, really, really excited about this book. I have a lot of work to do to finish it before the end of the year and turn it in to my publisher, which happens to be the good folks at Thomas Nelson and HarperCollins Christian Publishers. But I am very excited about this book and about having these kind of conversations more on my channel. So if you enjoyed this, click that like button for me. Definitely subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And please leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Just be kind about it. Don't tell me I'm crazy. Just tell me why you disagree with me if you do. This was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, I'm going to drop the link to that full video if you'd like to watch it over on Tim Frisch's channel. It was a ton of fun. I love those guys so much. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.